In today's video, we build a computer desk. Follow along to see how we do it. Alright, to start this build, we're basically down to two components. We have the top that we're going to make, and then we have the two cabinet sides. Both sides will consist of 3 drawers, and the drawer dimensions will be the same for both sides. The only thing I've done is on the right side, add a compartment where the PC will be housed. For the plywood, this is a 3/4 birch ply. I think it's more like 18 or 19 mil. And then for the top, we have 4/4 red oak. I have never worked with red oak before, so I'm excited to give it a try. I know it's very popular with furniture. Whenever we have full sheets of plywood, what I like to do is get some foam on the ground and cut the plywood to some more manageable lengths. Once I have some cut to rough width, then I take them to the table saw where they're more easily handled and cut them to their final width. And then I'll set up the crosscut sled and cut them to their final length. Once the plywood pieces for the carcass were cut, we took them to the workbench and started the edge banding process. We cut all pieces for the cabinets, including the drawer fronts. We will just be using 3/4 inch plywood for those as well, and just edge banding all the way around. Edge banding is pretty simple. We're not using any fancy tools here. Just using an iron, ironing on the edge banding, and then using a small block of 3/4 inch plywood just to apply some pressure, and then using these trimmer tools to cut them to final length. Giving the edges a slight sand just to get rid of the sharpness. So up to this point, you've seen us break down the sheet goods to the sizes, final trimming them at the table saw, and then bringing them to the table here to get edge banded. Choosing the better side of the veneer that'll be used on the exterior for the painted side, and then I've set four boards here aside, which we will pocket hole, and that'll hold the cabinet together. Normally for cabinetry, I would just drive screws from the outside, but we want to keep the outside finish, as that'll just get painted and be exposed, right? So to install the back panels of the carcasses, I had decided to run rabbets on the side panels so that the back panel could nestle in here. We build kitchen cabinets like this, so I just kind of carried over that process to here. Cutting the rabbets in the sides for the 3/4 inch ply, and then cutting the top and bottom panels 3/4 inch is shorter, or the back panel could be screwed in directly to those cross supports, and then using pocket holes on the sides into the side panels. Setting up one side at a time to be screwed together. When using pocket holes, I always use clamps. Pocket holes will always shift on you, and this way you can keep it as consistent as possible.
Since my top and bottom were 3/4 inch short, I would just put a piece of 3/4 inch ply underneath. That way my faces would all sit flush. I could clamp it together and drive the screws in.
And this is at the point in the project where the project is telling me to call it a day. Cutting the divider here for the PC and the drawers. And of course I measure 24.5, which it is. I double check, 24.5. I go to the table saw, I measure 24, and I cut it. So I'm a 1/2 inch short on this panel.
And here you can see, as I was saying, we have the dado or the rabbets on the side, and then the top and bottom panels just cut 3/4 inch shorter. When inserted here, this really helps square up the cabinet using 1 and 3 and 1/4 inch screws for the top and bottom, and then 1 inch pocket hole screws on the sides. And then using some spacers, I put in the divider for the PC case.
Hey bud, I think you're missing a spot down there. Yeah, I'll be honest, I like standing over here drinking coffee much better. Yeah, I should have you around more often. But your board there, it's a little off. I think you gotta get that side a little bit lower. So I am making a cutout here in the back for where the PC will be housed, just for cooling and airflow. I don't want to seal it off. Honestly, I kind of had forgotten about it at first. And midway through cutting this back panel, I realized
to cut this back panel out completely, I took it to the table saw, placed it over the blade at the right spot, and then just raised the blade. Using this technique for all 4 cuts. The end cuts I couldn't raise the blade completely, and that was good. It left tabs connecting that middle piece, so it wouldn't allow it to go flying out. Could come in, finish it up with the jigsaw, and then I went to flip my flip cart and used my rigid oscillating sander to clean up the corners. And then with the carcasses complete, we can move on to making the drawer boxes. Here we are using 1/2 inch Baltic birch, which comes in a 5x5 sheet, which is more easily handled, and so I normally don't break these down beforehand. Cutting our sides and our bottoms, front and backs, and then I swap out to my dado stack. and set it to the exact thickness of the 1/2 inch Baltic birch, and running a dado on all sides of the boxes to house the bottom panel. And before assembly, we take them all to the router table, all the sides, and give them a 1/8 inch round over on the top side, just to take away from that sharpness. Give them all a quick sand with 220 grit before assembly. For construction, we're just going to use glue and brad nails. And if the brad nail holes are too prominent, I'll just quickly put in some wood filler just to get rid of the holes. But this will be plenty strong for these boxes, and they turned out really well. Next, on to installing the slides. Here I just used some spacers on the bottom. I used a 3/4 inch piece of plywood and 1/2 inch. And then I inset the slides, because we are going with the inset drawer fronts. I inset the slides with a scrap piece of plywood just to get them to their perfect position. After I roughly position the box where I want it to be. In this case, I do about a 1/4 inch from the bottom, and then the second drawer would be 1/4 inch from that middle divider. So I just measure from that bottom plate to the middle of the drawer slide, minus 1/4 inch, and then transfer that line to the sides of the drawer box. That way I know exactly where my holes need to be drilled for the slides. Line up the front, drill the first hole, and then you can use it as a pivot, and then get the other ones pre-drilled and screwed in as well. Next, we get out the playing cards, but not to actually play cards and have fun with them. No, we use them to space our drawer fronts, obviously, right? That's what we do. It's like Rockler should start selling playing cards. Anyway, once we get the gap around the drawer fronts all equally spaced with our playing cards, then we will reach over and drive in some screws from the back, pre-drilling first and then driving in some screws. Found these cool looking drawer pulls on Amazon at a very friendly price, and so that's what I went with as well. The top drawer was a little bit harder to get the front installed. I tried 2 different methods on both sides. This one here on the left worked better. I used CA glue on the right, and on the left I actually used a spacer behind the drawer boxes so that the drawer boxes would be pushed out a little bit further, and I just pulled them both out together, and that seemed to work okay. Then with that set, we take it all apart again, and we're preparing for finish. Hit it with some primer using the Minimite 4 from Fuji, and then switching to some Benjamin Moore in Hail Blue, and sprayed 2 coats of this on the cabinets. And with that all done, next we move to the top. This is rough lumber, so we're gonna finish it all up, starting at the jointer, hitting it on one face and then one edge, and then taking that to the planer to get it to the proper thickness. trying to take off as minimal amount of material as possible just to get it smooth, and then setting up the boards how we want the grain orientation to look the best, and then marking it for some biscuits. To keep this glue up easy, I did not glue all 4 at once. My biscuit joiner, either it's a slot cutter or my biscuits, won't fully align the boards. There's a little bit of wiggle room. So I decided to do 2 boards at a time in the glue up. That way I could finish them up, sand them, or make them completely level either by running them through the drum sander or planer, as they are just under 11 inches wide. The 2 boards together are just about 11 inches wide. And as I had just gotten a drum sander, I was very interested in trying that piece of machinery out and seeing how it would work flattening these boards. They are quite long, but I do have an in-feed and out-feed, so I was willing to give it a try. But before we could do that, we did have some knots and some small holes in the board, so we're going to fill those with some epoxy. After that cured overnight, we brought the boards to the drum sander, taking very slow passes and handling both sides with extreme care. I didn't find it the best, as these boards were near 8 feet long and the supports for the in-feed and out-feed were just not long enough, and I had to rely on myself holding it while moving backwards was not the most efficient thing. But with 2 boards it worked out. After gluing the 2 boards together to make the full top, there was a bit of unevenness in the middle, and then I still tried running it through the drum sander, and that's where I ran into a little bit of trouble. Having that 8 foot length in top run through the sander and supporting on one end, there were about 2 spots where the drum kind of bit into the wood a bit, which just created more work while sanding. And to finish the top up, just give it a nice 1/8 inch round over, just to break those sharp edges, top and bottom. And to finish the top up, we use some Osmo in clear. This is the first time I've ever used Osmo. I mean, most people know about it. It's got great reviews, so I was willing to give it a shot. I was going to use Odie's, but we don't have Odie's readily available locally. And this we did, just using blue shop towel to work it in, allowing it to sit 5-10 minutes, and then buffing it off with a clean piece of shop towel. Did one side, waited a few hours, did the other side, and then let it sit overnight. And before we could bring this all together, we needed to install some feet. Found some inexpensive ones on Amazon that had some good adjustability, as this was going on a concrete floor in the basement. This had almost near a 1/2 inch in adjustability. And then one last step was installing some figure 8 clips to mount to the top to the cabinets. And with that, this job was done. A simpler design, but a very functional one. And with it installed in its new home, we can call this project done. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, God bless.